to Assigned Reading, the podcast where we read feminist essays and talk about them like real humans, not professors. I'm Becky Mollenkamp, and each week, a friend and I will read a powerful piece of feminist writing and talk about it here. There's no grades, there's no pop quizzes, don't worry. The essay is always linked in the show notes if you'd like to read it, but whether you do or not, you're invited to join us and listen in on this conversation. Let's dig in.
Most people don't have the opportunity to have nuanced conversations about a single word that they apply to themselves. So having a different word allows for like a line in the sand, right? Or like a stamp that they can apply that says like, yeah, feminism it's a complex thing. There are different offshoots that still oppress other women. And like, this is the one I'm claiming. And it's just shorthand for fuck all those people who aren't actually practicing real feminism.
You were just listening to Paige Worthy, who is my guest today to discuss an essay by Lindy West. It's linked in the show notes, as always, if you want to read it. It's called What Nobody Else Will Tell You About Feminism from 2012, I believe, and it definitely feels dated, but you'll hear all of that. And I just want to say that I went into this episode with about a vertigo and really kind of not wanting to do the conversation, but not wanting to reschedule again. And the power of these conversations for me, I can't tell you, because I went into it going and I left it feeling so energized and my cup was filled. And that is what these kinds of conversations do for me. And I hope they do for you as well. And quickly about Paige Worthy, so you know who you're listening to. She is a marketing person who doesn't think of herself as a marketing person. She helps small businesses and only those that are run by people who give a shit. So if you're listening and you own a business, you're her person. And she helps them market to their ideal customers without feeling icky, which for a lot of us, we know marketing can feel icky. And it's because it's traditionally that bro marketing that's all about shame and guilt and pressure and hustle and bleh. And that is not how she shows up. She's really awesome. And I think you're going to love her work. She's open about her mental health and her lefty politics. We recorded this while she was on a sabbatical, which is the first thing we discuss before we really get into the essays. I hope you enjoy, and thank you again for listening. Hi, Paige. How are you?
I'm great. It's nice to see you.
Yes. And full transparency, I'm dealing with some vertigo and we rescheduled because of that. So thank you for doing that.
It was easy.
And I'm going to try my hardest.
I'm on sabbatical right now. So I got nothing but time.
Can you, I know this has nothing, well, it may have nothing to do with what we're talking about, or it might be fully about what we're talking about. So let's see, because I'm really curious. What does that mean? Sabbatical. I think when I think a lot of people think of sabbatical, they think professors, right? And so that's where my brain goes. But I have been hearing more about like entrepreneurs and just all sorts of folks trying to plan sabbaticals. So what does it look like for you? How did you make that happen? Why? Give me the deets.
So it's probably actually not a sabbatical. It is a 2-month break that was born out of burnout. So I think that for me, it's an opportunity to refocus on the things that I enjoy in life and reconnect with creativity and just take a beat, take a breather. The world's kind of hideous right now. The vibes are off. And you know, one of the things that I've been seeing over and over again is the importance of doing things that bring us joy. Like joy can be radical. So I wrapped up my projects that I was working on. I don't take on a ton of clients. So I told the few amazing clients I have, you know, hey, I'm taking a couple months off. I can recommend people to you who might be able to help you in the interim if you need things. And that was it. We were off to the races. So I started on April 7th, and it's been weird not waking up with a revenue generating purpose every day, but I've been reading books. I've been going to the pottery studio. I'm learning how to make pottery and having a blast with that. And yeah, just doing my thing, not working.
It's amazing.
It's nice.
And it is sort of an act of resistance against capitalism. And I think it's amazing you're able to do it. I think it does relate in some ways to some of what we're talking about with feminism and intersectional feminism in interesting ways. So we'll see. Maybe we'll weave it into this conversation, but I'll bring us back to, I just think that's fascinating. And I think it's something a lot of people, I think we're all just like fucking spent. And so hearing about how someone else is dealing with, is really nice. Well, we're actually here to talk about this essay from Lindy West, which is called What No One Else Will Tell You About Feminism from 2012. It's definitely old. And the
And
reason
it
I picked
reads
it is
that
mostly,
way.
yeah, right? Good, good.
It
It does.
screams 2012.
It very much so. It screams like, I guess it's from Jezebel, but to me, it feels like a
Mm-hmm.
BuzzFeed article, which is totally fine. But I picked it because it
That's
was
her
Lindy West.
style.
Yeah. And I don't know a lot about Lindy West, but I've watched her show Shrill on Hulu. I don't
Yes.
know if you've ever seen it. It stars
Semi-autobiographical.
yeah, and I wish I could think of her name, but she's from SNL. But
Katie
anyway,
Bryant. It's
thank you.
80.
That's it. Adie Bryant. Adie Bryant. And it's fantastic. And I love that show. I don't know if I think it may be done at this point.
I think
But
it's done.
it was a few years old. There was a couple seasons. Fantastic. I highly recommend the show. So and because I was semi-autobiographical and we're not doing books for this because who the hell has the time to read whole books? I certainly can't be reading a whole book every week for these. So that's why I'm choosing essays. And I feel like it also helps other people be able to have entry points that are not entire books.
Absolutely.
But this one I didn't read beforehand. I'm trying not to read all of them beforehand. I just wanted something from Lindy West. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this was interesting. What did you think?
So in the spirit of my time off of work, I took a little bit of a cop out. I have read this before, as like a baby feminist back in 2012. I mean, that's what, 13 years ago?
Yes.
Wild. That's wild.
Very, because it does not. It feels like it was yesterday.
It does. It does. I kind of wish it was 2012 again. I'd be okay going back to that. We had
before
our own
we even
problems
thought
back
about
then.
We did, but we had a very different president, and I guess birtherism had started, but I feel like it was before anyone was taking this horrible orange giant seriously. So there was that.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes. But I think the notes I took were, it goes a little hard into the humor, and it's a good entry point for people who, maybe aren't like deep into their feminism journey. But I'm also kind of like, wait, who is this for? I go, is this meant like as like a fuck you rallying cry? Or like, it certainly doesn't feel terribly educational, but
only like you said at that very most basic level. And I know it was a bit like, because I assume it originally ran in Jezebel where we read it. And Jezebel is not, in my mind, for complete newbie feminists. Like, I don't think you're subscribing to Jezebel if you're somebody who's like needs people to convince you're a feminist. And it feels like this whole thing is like trying to say, yeah, you're a feminist. Now I'm trying to think back to 2012 and I wonder, could there have been at that time what happens frequently and is happening again now, the regular repeated backlash against feminism? And this was a response to that potentially?
Yeah. Listen, I imagine that's something that doesn't go away.
It does
in
not.
Like tiny ripples and not like big waves. When I was a freshman in college, so that was in 2001, 2002, I took my very first women's studies course, which by the way, like is about to not exist at universities because woke
DEI. Oh my God.
But I mean, that was one of the first things that really like opened my eyes. We did a lot of reading, but like the first day of class, we watched this little short film that I think was called something like The F Word. Right. And it was a lot of man on the street, woman on the street, because there were women that they asked, but interviews about like, well, what does feminism mean to you? And there was so much of it that was exactly what's in this introductory paragraph about how feminists are reactionary, undersexed, man-hating bitches.
They need to stop their whining.
Yeah, I'm going to keep whining personally and keep being a man-hating bitch. I was like, honestly, where's the lie? Where's the lie?
Mine, I just keep getting more and more man-hating. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. And now we have cats too. Now we're cat ladies as well.
Sure. Thanks, JD Vance.
At least we have.
Yeah. I can't. Unfortunately, I'm allergic to cats.
So am I. I have terrible allergy-induced asthma, but I have 3 cats and I will not give them up.
I used to do that. I used to go to sleep miserable every night with my cat. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I do think it's that response to which you're right. It doesn't go away. It's still there. These people who, and including women, but all sorts of folks who still have that, like, I'm not a feminist, or I believe in equal rights for women, but I'm not a feminist. I'm not a feminist, but like this whole, like, there's something about that label that
Mm-hmm.
remains so fully charged that it's really interesting that and then we have to keep having these conversations that are like, no, motherfucker, you're a feminist. Like, own it. Be okay with it.
Yes.
Like, why is it so scary and awful?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
blame
I
Rush
mean,
Limbaugh.
I blame Rush Limbaugh for a lot of things.
Yeah. Rest not in peace.
Rest in, well, hell. Rest in hell. Or
Where I'm
don't
sure
rest.
he's currently. Yeah.
I hope he is tormented every day of his afterlife.
Mm-hmm. If there is such a thing, I'm sure he is.
Yes. Yeah, it's really weird that that little word can have so much power, at which
Yeah.
I think also speaks to the power of the concept, right? But it backfires occasionally.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, part of that I think is it's interesting because some of it is, I think, exactly what you just said. It speaks to the power of what it's about because it is so challenging that
Mm-hmm.
when you start anything that starts to challenge the systems as we know it, Black Lives Matter, right? All cops are bastards. These things that we hear, those things become immediately demonized for a very good reason that has nothing to do with actually what they're about. Like, because most people agree with a lot of the fundamentals of what these different
Yep.
things are about, but
Yep.
it's because what they represent is a challenge to the system, and the system will
Yep.
do everything to protect itself.
And it requires verbally and conceptually taking a stand against a really powerful institution, whether that's like an institution that lives in a building or an institution that like lives in our brains. And I think it all also requires a shouldering of a responsibility for our part in it, acknowledging the work that we have to do ourselves to undo the stuff
Yeah.
that's preventing whatever that phrase is from, like, defund the police. I was actually having a conversation with my mom and my stepdad the other day about I don't even know where the conversation stemmed from, but we were talking about abolition, defund the police, and it turned into this, like, it's kind of if you give a mouse a cookie. Did you ever read that book?
I have because I have a young child. Yes.
Yes. Well, I was a young child and I loved
I was
that.
a long time ago.
Yeah, well, yes, but it's like, sure, if you want to defund the police, like, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to create community supports, you have to come up with alternatives to imprisonment and incarceration, and like, what does that look like? And it can become overwhelming. Like, any of these things, like the stuff that lies underneath the catchphrase or the word, I don't know, maybe it overwhelms people.
Maybe, but Paige, I feel like you're giving them too much credit, or maybe I'm not giving them
Maybe you're going to
enough.
say that.
Well, but maybe I'm not giving them enough, and I'm definitely willing to be challenged on that. My feeling is most people don't pull at the string, right? They're not pulling at those threads to understand all of the ways that there's like these spider webs that it creates, right? I feel like they just, for most, the average person who hears defund the police, they just think that like they don't have any level of deeper understanding beyond that and just hear, well, then I won't be safe. And I think what they hear the most, because it's the people with the most privilege who are the ones who react most strongly. I think what they hear I think this part's unconscious, but they get this is my privilege is threatened. And I think that's
Well,
the part that's hard. But I could be, again, I'm open to like believing better about people.
listen, maybe I'm at the point of my, because it's 9:17 a.m., right? Maybe I'm at the point of my caffeination that I haven't quite reached like rage critical mass of like the coffee getting to my brainstem. So I think you make an awesome point too. So there's, as with everything, there's probably a spectrum of people.
And I don't mean your parents, because like, right, for your parents, that conversation may well be that they start to pull it. Well, okay, we don't have to specifically reference them, but I think there are plenty of people I speak to for whom they do understand, and they do start to pull those threads, and it does start to feel, and I've been that person where you pull at the threads and it does start to feel overwhelming, especially like I had the first episode of this show is a conversation with Amelia Ruby talking exactly about abolition and Angela Davis's work in that area. And I mean, Amelia has to pull me in a few times because I start to go down some of these very conventional capitalist white supremacist lines of thought that we are all ingrained in, that is like, yeah, but then what? What's the alternative? And it's all too much and it's too hard and it's too big. And her point is like, what we're doing right now is too hard. What we're doing right now is too big. What we do right now costs a fortune and it's complicated. It doesn't work. All of these things, right? So yeah, is the alternative big?
Her,
maybe.
By the way,
I know, right?
I've known Amelia for years, and actually ran into her at a restaurant a few weeks ago, which was delightful.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and odd since you don't live in the same city.
Yeah, we do. Unless she was.
Wait, you're in
town. I'm in Chicago.
She lives in Omaha. She's in Omaha.
Okay, that's weird. She must have been visiting.
She must have been. I was going to say. She's very proud of her Lincoln. Or I mean, her Nebraska. I said Omaha. It could be Lincoln. She's in Nebraska, but yeah. So see, it is amazing. A small and weird world. But she is awesome and she is amazing. And it is that like reminder that, yeah, it's overwhelming, but what we're doing now is also overwhelming and ineffective in so many ways. Policing. And that's exactly it, right? And it's also not just the devil we know. It feels easier because of that. It also feels easier because it doesn't challenge all of these like things around privilege and identity. And that's the part that's really hard, because when you start to have those conversations with people, if you help them pull back the layers of the onion, then eventually they have to get to the place of that confrontation for themselves to say, shit, this is really because like it threatens my identity as a person with a lot of privilege. And I might have to give up some of that privilege. And am I really ready to do that? And that's really hard shit that we have to do as white folks who have, you know, obviously as women, we have a marginalization and maybe we have other identities that are marginalized, but we will always have this benefit, this massive privilege around this, just the color of our skin. And that's really hard.
That we instantly weaponize without even thinking about it.
Yes, all the time. Because it's just when the air you breathe is racism. It is like, I think we start to, especially when you're early in the journey of this work, it's really easy to have all sorts of that white guilt that comes up. And then when white guilt comes up, we often turn to defensiveness because we don't want to believe, like we always want to believe we're the exception. I'm not racist, right? I'm one of the good ones. Yep. And so then we have to start to defend ourselves and our beliefs. And that's not where the work and the magic happens. And so, yeah, but the truth is like, we're all doing it all the time. And it's not because we're bad people. It's because we're in a bad system. We're breathing bad air, right? And it's exceptionally hard to change that.
And I think that's where this article or this essay misses, right? Because I think it was written before the concept of intersectionality really took hold. And
in the mainstream, although I will have to say, I feel like Lindy West knew better. And maybe that wasn't her aim here. And there was some hinting at intersectionality, right?
It was like a line.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
First wave feminists were still pretty racist. But she even said, but you know, nobody's perfect. And I was like, girl, what?
Right.
What? But
yeah, and you know, talking about these like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, people we now know, and she mentions like they were racist as fuck or something. But yeah, it was that like, you know, it was sort of like just sloughed off. Like, yeah, they were racist, horrible people, but like, yeah, no one's great. And you know, and it is that like it's.
I wrote in my notes that she was awfully flip about that, and I understand that applying anything but that treatment probably would have disrupted the tone that she was going for. And right.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also is problematic when the person writing it is white.
Yes.
Right. Like, I think if this were written by a Black woman and decided to take that kind of a tone, it would read differently. And I also don't think that would probably happen.
Yeah, I don't think that a Black woman would have written anything like this.
Right, exactly. And I think that is where you get into some of the problematic stuff, is when we have white folks writing these sorts of things and failing to really, and not just in a flip way, but failing to truly honor where white folks have fallen down as feminists along this journey, because that is also why, and this is where she's not drawing that link, that's a big part of why a lot of people don't identify as feminists. Now, not the men and the like, the white ladies, whatever, the ones who are like afraid to identify as feminists because they think they're cat hate loving, man hating people. But there are many people who fully agree with all of these things who don't want that label because it has excluded them over history. And rather than inviting,
like bringing in like womanism, which
yes.
I admittedly, I do not know a ton about. And if I really dug into that side of things and it were a label that I am allowed to apply to myself, because I also don't want to co-opt something that has been claimed by a marginalized group of women and, women identifying folks. But I think that probably is the label that I would prefer to assume for myself because it's so much bigger.
Well, and that's why I always say that I'm an intersectional feminist, because I feel like that helps to clarify that I am not a TERF. I'm not a good white feminist. Like, no, my feminism is intersectional feminism. And in my mind, if it's not intersectional, it's not really what feminism should be or is meant to be about.
Yeah.
But that's where I think this falls short, because it feels like it is playing into some of that has been so exclusionary. Like this feels like it was written it's a few years before, but it feels like the Pussy Hat folks who are showing up and all of the, that women's march that then so many Black women felt so excluded again, right? And it felt like it did not understand and address what it means to be a woman, because if one of us is oppressed, all of us is oppressed, which means if our Black sisters are oppressed, we are oppressed. If our trans sisters are oppressed, we are oppressed, right? If our fat sisters, our disabled sisters, if our neurodivergent sisters. So if your feminism doesn't include every type of woman, right, then it's not actually feminism. And that's why I still want to hold on to the label, because I want, and maybe I'm fighting a silly fight, but to me, it's like, I don't want to let the J.K. Rowlings of the world win and get to own feminism when what they're doing isn't feminism at all. Fuck that. Like, that's not what feminism is and should be. No. But I also like to fully recognize, I understand all the reasons why people reject the label, not all the reasons. Why the reasons that people who share these beliefs reject the label.
Yeah.
Like, I get it.
Well,
because
I think it's probably some of it is like most people don't have the opportunity to have nuanced conversations about a single word that they apply to themselves. So having a different word allows for like a line in the sand, right? Or like a stamp that they can apply that says like, yeah, feminism it's a complex thing. There are different offshoots that still oppress other women. And like, this is the one I'm claiming. And it's just shorthand for fuck all those people who aren't actually practicing real feminism. I'm being very charitable this morning.
And I want to be more charitable, Paige. And there are times where I am. And Amelia, I can't wait for you to hear her episode too, because it's that like, she comes back to love and things that I'm like, okay, right. I need to remember of like, and I practice that sort of loving kindness to other people. And sometimes I can. Today I can't because I'm dealing with vertigo and fuck that. I don't have the energy, right? So I think that's part of our
You're depleted.
Is like,
you are depleted.
Yeah, where you have capacity, it's great.
No room for bullshit.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This makes me think of something that's very much related to a lot of this, because so I saw Jamila Jamil is apparently doing a talk show or something. And Summer Tohill, or however you say her name, I don't know if you know her, but she's an Australian. Summer Tohill? Tohill? Anyway, follow her on Instagram.
Well, it doesn't ring a bell anyway.
Yeah, she's an Australian feminist. She's amazing. So I'll link to her in show notes if people want to check her out on Instagram. By the time this runs, it'll be a few weeks old, but you can still go back and see some of the controversy about Jamila Jamil, if it's still up. I don't know. The two of them have been doing a little bit of talking, so maybe they'll resolve it. But Jamila apparently has a talk show, and part of her premise, and now, to be fair, I haven't seen the talk show. I don't know. And Jamila is trying to say like, hey, I feel like maybe this was misrepresented a bit. But Summer's point was she was there at the taping and left at the halfway point, because the first half felt very much to her of like, hey, we need to like meet men where they are and be more understanding and try to educate them more. This whole feeling of like the manosphere thing that's happening and all of that
Yeah.
the shit, right? And so Summer's whole point was, fuck that. Your reaction was hers. Like, fuck that. And she's like, we have been caretaking emotionally and in many ways for men for millennia. And it is not our responsibility to educate them, to get them here, to make them understand these things. Men need to lead the charge. They need to educate each other.
If you're not fucking here by now, what are you doing?
You're very much actively, you don't want to participate.
Willfully ignorant.
And I do see these women that educate men on these issues, that are showing up in that way, trying to be the people who are like, let me bring you in, let me be more gentle with it, like not just say all men. I'm not that person. I'm the all men until no men person. And I'm also like, I don't find it my responsibility to do that. I do see that it's lovely that there are people who can, and there are moments in my life where I have that softness to say, if you're swimming in these waters, of course you're showing up that way, blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to draw, just to be very clear, I'm not drawing any equivalencies around oppression here, but it is similar to this feeling where Black folks are like, it's not my job to educate you, white people.
Absolutely.
You need to do this work yourself. And that's how I feel when I'm like, when people, because I will have it all the time on social media. I talk about these issues a lot, and I have people showing up to me all the time saying, I'm too mean to men, that how are we ever going to win men over if we're showing up like the angry ladies, all of this stuff. And it's like, when Summer put words to it of like, no, we've been doing that forever and it hasn't worked. Why do we think now suddenly it will work? It doesn't work. Men have to figure this shit out for themselves and educate each other. And that is where I feel like this feels a little bit like it's in some ways speaking to men, or to the women who don't give a shit. And I'm just like, I don't know. There's a lot about it that feels lacking because of that. Cause I'm like, I'm done. I'm not educating men.
I feel like the first time I read this, which had to have been some good time ago,
mm-hmm.
I probably reacted a lot more warmly to it. And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. And now with Me Too under our belts, and with Trump under our belts now twice, and honestly under our belts quite literally, like
in our pants,
so much matter. I
have
so
rage,
much more
straight
angry.
up rage.
I won't pretend that my rage at the world isn't part of me taking time off. Like, it literally consumes me. I actually have a t-shirt with an adorable kitten on it that says rage consumes me. And I wear it all the time because it speaks what's on my heart.
Yeah.
Obviously our perspective is going to naturally shift over time. And I'm glad that mine has shifted in this way, because I feel like I'm seeing things clearly. But I also think that so many people have regressed over the years. Like, we're going backwards in so many ways. And so, though this is strongly worded, I think it's easy to kind of toss off as like a comedic piece, although I don't actually think it's that funny. I think it's a little bit team try too hard on the humor side of things, which, like, I love Lindy West. I think she has a brilliant brain, but this humor doesn't track with me.
Yeah, it may speak to the time it was written in. I don't know, but
it doesn't resonate with me as a writer. Even the beginning, she references like all the people who, if you're not a feminist, you hate all these women: Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jennifer Aniston, Jennifer Lopez, and then she goes into like Kim Kardashian, Khloe Kardashian, Kourtney, Kraken, Carphone, Kickball, Corncob, and I'm like, even that feels I'm not a Kardashian fan. There is so much wrong over there, but even that feels a little bit dismissive of women, and it's cringe.
That whole part of it's very bizarre. I mean, a lot of it's really bizarre. And not that Lindy West will ever listen to this, but Lindy, if you listen to it, I have a feeling you don't really, I doubt, I would be surprised anyway if she would stand by this today and say,
I don't think
I feel really great about that piece
at the top of her portfolio. Doubtful.
Yeah. Right. I'm certain it would look different if she wrote it today. I have to believe that's the case. But, you know, and all of that stuff aside, it's like the parts like, so she mentions Betty Friedan, but there's like no mention of the fact that Betty Friedan was the person who was most actively trying to keep Black women and lesbian women, Black lesbian women out of that second wave of feminism. Like she was so anti-lesbian. She was the one who came up with that term about like the lavender, whatever, you know, and that they then eventually co-opted and said, this is ours. We're going to own that. The lavender wave, right? And calling themselves that. But like Betty Friedan was actively anti-lesbian. And I don't really see a lot of mention to these things here. So what bothers me is the way that there's like, and it's not like in 2012, people didn't know that, right? Especially Lindy West. I know she knew that. So it's like you're trying to bring people in, but unfortunately, I feel like what you're doing is you're just bringing people into that same outdated, not intersectional version of feminism by still continuing to uplift and like sort of idolize these folks without bringing the reality of who they were. I think it's fine to talk about Betty Friedan and Susan B. Anthony and folks. We can talk about their contributions, but only if we equally talk about the ways that they caused harm, because they caused very real harm. And this doesn't, or if it does, it's barely with like a little, like a blip of a notice of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like with a wink. And there's also no mention of people who were left on the outskirts of the movement at the time. And like, what trails were they blazing? What were they bringing into the conversation that was being ignored? And I think like there's room for fucking line breaks in this piece. My God, it was hard to read. But
it's exceptionally short too, so there was plenty of space for her to write more.
There's room, right? We don't have word limits on web pages, right? Like, I mean, maybe she was writing to a word limit, but there's stuff you could take out, girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean,
where's your editor?
Right. Well, I don't, maybe the Jezebel editors at that time and maybe still didn't care. It was from, just so people know too, it's from a book called How to Be a Person, The Stranger's Guide to College. So obviously the idea is writing this for younger women. And unfortunately what I think happened is Lindy is writing from her own experience of being a young white woman, maybe coming into an understanding around feminism and wanting to speak to that. But unfortunately, all she's doing is perpetuating white feminism. Because this very much.
So that's where there's a line that I did not understand. It's if you're not a feminist or something blamelessly ignorant, like a baby or a ferret or a college freshman. And I was like, what are you talking about? That makes a lot more sense that she's actually
it's meant to
talking
be for those
to
folks.
students.
But, and you know, the part of this that bothered me the most, I'm interested what you think, was the subhead that says male privilege. It is real and it is totally bogus. And I don't understand that. So she talks about privilege being invisible. You have no idea what male privilege is. If you have no idea what male privilege is, there's a good chance you're benefiting from male privilege. That's how privilege works. But what does this mean that it's totally bogus? It's real and it's totally bogus. Oh, it meaning, okay, hold on. My brain's finally getting there.
It's bullshit.
Bullshit. Got it. Yeah. I was like, how are you saying it's real and it's bogus? Got it. It's bullshit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. At least she was saying that.
If a critical thinker like you reads that and it's like, what? And like, you're not the only one. There's like a lack
I reread the paragraph. I didn't reread the headline, but I reread the paragraph a few times going like, wait a minute. I don't see how you're here saying that it's not, because bogus to me means not real, which is different than bullshit or it's a bunch of crap or I hate it or whatever. Like to me, that means
totally bogus, like in 90s speak.
Sure. Totally because everyone talks that way.
Yeah, I did like the last sentence in that. Privilege is real, and anyone who tells you otherwise is Ann Coulter. Like, Ann Coulter hate is forever, timeless.
For sure. And you know, it's the times are wild when she has actually been a little more sane in like the MAGA world lately than some of the other folks, which is terrifying. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Wasn't she speaking out about tariffs though? Like it was something not at all related to like being a human.
It will only be something that benefits her. So whatever it is, it would have to be something that, I'm sure it's about money and not about people because she doesn't care about people. I don't know that she is a person. I think she might be a bot. I have no idea.
Yeah, she's a cyborg.
But yeah. Well, this piece, I think we both agree, is probably not worth, if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably not worth reading because I think it's probably way earlier than you, other than the thing that I think it can be helpful with potentially is understanding if you are one of those people who cares to try and meet people where they are, or at least understand where people are. I do think it can be helpful for understanding because to me, it just reads like peak white feminism. And I think if you need a better understanding of what white feminism looks like because sometimes people will be like, I don't really get it. I always recommend reading White Feminism by Koa Beck because it's a great book written by a woman of color who speaks to these issues. And I think that that's who we should be learning from. But if you're like, I just want to see, it's fantastic. Although you may not need it because you're probably beyond white feminism, but it's still really good to read.
God, I hope
but if you
am.
Well, that's maybe not, I think I can't say I'm beyond it. I'm still sussing out where I have it. But I think if for people who are like, I don't understand what white feminism looks like show me what it looks like. This to me is sort of what it looks like. It looks like it looks like girl bossing too close to the sun, right? It looks like being like, I'm all about girl power, Ray John sisters. Yeah. Without giving any more context about like you said, who's being left out, who's on the margins, how do these things that have happened? Yeah. These people that we're uplifting, how have they caused harm? It's like, this is exactly what it looks like, unfortunately. And again, I really love Shrill and I think it did such a better job around these issues. So I do think that shows her evolution, but this shows sort of what that white feminism can look like. So I think it's valuable to read it in that way of getting that better understanding of it and maybe understanding where some of your white feminist friends who are a little like the more on that girl bossy train, what they probably know, what they probably think, and maybe how you can speak to the parts where they're missing stuff.
It's a yes and for sure. And by the way, that was plenty charitable of you. So
thank you. That's where there we go.
Maybe we're like crossing.
It's rubbing off on me. Maybe I just need to wake up a little more and get to that place. I wake up in rage and then I soften.
Yeah, I made a note that I think that there are more recent pieces that cover the history and evolution of feminism a little bit better with less of a focus on the lols, right? Because this is obviously a humor piece as much as it is a like, guess what, you're a feminist piece. I don't think it's terribly successful on either end, but it's also not going to take you forever to read it. So give it a scan.
Yeah, it'll take you like 5 minutes.
How dated it is. Yeah, it'll take you more time to try to get through one of those walls of text without losing your place than it will to actually read the whole piece once you can.
It'll take more time to listen to your inner voice going, are you fucking kidding me? And like, what? And where's than actually reading it. That was my experience. I feel like we've been unkind. And now I'm worried about that. I don't know why, because I think it's important to be critical of stuff that shows up white feminist. And I think it's because it really that's where I'm going to be charitable is I think it does show though how far we can come, right?
Absolutely.
Because if this was me in college and she's speaking to college kids, that's where I feel like it's a missed opportunity is, wait, you have this opportunity to help these kids going into college to understand why their feminism is so lacking and what needs to change. And I think also this piece should have been very clearly labeled like, hey, yo, this is for white people. This is for the white girls and the white boys. This is because I don't think anyone who is not white would I think you would only rage at reading something like this. I would hope because it does so clearly exclude you. But I do think if I'm being honest, it speaks to where I was in 1993.
Sure.
Not 2012, but at that age, it speaks to where I was at. Like my feminism, in my teens into my mostly in my teens, early 20s, looked like this. It looked like this. And I'm willing, I think we also need to honor that, like to step up and say, yeah, this was what my feminism was. Because if someone does read this and say like, what's wrong with this piece? Because there's probably people who would, right? They'd read it and say, what's wrong with it? I don't want you to feel shameful and like icky after hearing this, because I want you to know, like, I also remember being that version of feminism.
Yeah. But I also wonder, kids, Jesus.
This kid
I'm
today.
That age now. Kids today, like going into college, like kids are fucking smart now. Like I don't whoa. And I wonder even what the children would think if they looked at this book, the full title of this book is How to Be a Person: The Stranger's Guide to College, Sex, Intoxicants, Tacos, and Life Itself,
Wow,
which
that's a lot of things.
okay, and like Dan Savage is the co-author, and I have some mixed feelings about Dan Savage
I was gonna
that
say,
I
I mean,
can't
he's definitely
really
been problematic.
articulate. Yeah. So I don't know what today's youths would think about this. I think we recognize it as something that we experienced at a time in our lives, but I also think that people who are going to subscribe to the ideals of feminism now do know better at the outset, or most of
Boy,
them do.
I hope you're right, Paige. I think you're right about the kids, the kids today. Like I think about my nieces who are, young college women. There's some of my own stuff showing up, right? Still calling them girls. They are women.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that they
Co-eds.
would know. Yeah, right. I think they know better than this. I really like their feminism has evolved well past this because there's also very little about LGBTQ in here. I mean, there's a little, but not, anyway, they're well evolved beyond that. I guess what I'm thinking is more the folks who are women probably in their 40s, like elder millennials, young Gen Xers, maybe even all millennials. I don't know, but certainly elder millennials who this was their feminism in college, who maybe haven't evolved beyond that. Right. Because I think I run into those folks a lot I don't know if you do, in the entrepreneurial space. It's that girl bossy, despite the fact that they're very, very grown ass women who are still like girl bossy, right? That girl power kind of folk who grew up with a vision of feminism and I'm speaking very much about white women here, to be clear, who grew up with this like white feminist, this vision of feminism.
We girls can do anything, right, Barbie?
Yeah, right. Exactly. For those folks for whom Barbie was a revelation, right? Instead of it being like, okay, I get it, but it was like, is this like shocking? Like that speech at the end right. The people for whom that speech from America Ferrera was like life changing. Right. But that's the thing is they still exist, Paige. Like as much as I want to believe we've evolved beyond that, right? I'm with you. I do think like when I think about my nieces, they have evolved beyond. But there are a lot that still haven't because they're being raised by these millennials and these Gen Xers. One, so they're getting that version from their mom and hopefully they're learning beyond it, but some of them aren't. Or those folks themselves that are still in that 30s, 40s, mostly in the 40s sort of age range, who never got beyond this. This is still what they think of when they think of feminism. And that's why I think for folks who are maybe listening, I don't know how, but you're here and I appreciate it. And you're thinking like, if you're white in a white body and you're going, okay, wait a minute. Is my feminism intersectional? Has my feminism evolved? Is my feminism lacking? Like, if you read this piece and it leaves you saying, I'm not sure I see the problem, then that's an invitation. I don't want that to be a judgment or an anger. Right? Yeah, it's an invitation to say, let's do more. And I think there's other episodes that are going to help you with that and many other readings that will help. And one of the reasons why I was trying to not do a lot of readings from white women. And this is why, because unfortunately, now, of course, something from Lindy that's newer would not, I would hope, and I'm sure does not reflect this, but like, this is what white feminism looks like in action. It looks like we can do anything. And hey, Susan B. Anthony showed us we can. Like, no.
Yeah, and like we can do anything.
Yes.
And
but only
like
if we all can do anything.
There's a couple more steps in there. Like
right.
It's not
well,
just
what
like
means
glass ceiling.
Right? Yeah, you white-bodied person can do anything. But does that mean we collectively women can do anything? And that's the invitation for that further exploration, because I know, like, this is always where I feel like it's so important for us to be vulnerable and candid and honest about the fact that my feminism used to look like this. And it's pains me now to have to admit that. But it's true. And I think it's important to admit that because I think other white women need to see, like, we can grow beyond this. And we must grow beyond this.
Nobody comes out of the womb a fully baked, nuanced feminist or whatever their cause celebra is. Like, no, we have to learn.
Yeah.
We have to learn.
And you know what it makes me think too is this is not, it's not exactly related to this, but it is in a way because I think some people listening will resonate with this, and you may as well. It's this learning in public in a way that didn't have to happen pre-internet. So like Lindy, if this was pre-internet days, I have a feeling this wouldn't have, I don't know, maybe because it did end up in a book. So I guess I shouldn't say that. But like a lot of this kind of rhetoric, this kind of writing might not have ever been seen, or at least wouldn't have been seen by as many people. It wouldn't have lived on the way it does now, right? You wouldn't. And it's that learning in public thing that scares a lot of people into saying like, they don't want to talk about things. They don't want to take a
Call out
stand on
culture.
anything. Yeah, because we're also afraid of like, Lindy, I'm sure this existing, I would hope, probably makes her cringe. But then maybe there's also that part of being able to say, yeah, and look, I've evolved and I've grown and it's possible for all of us. But that is like, I can see where it makes people feel like I don't want to come on a show like this and have this conversation because what if in 10 years I sound like an asshole for it, right? Because we've evolved and grown beyond that version of whatever it is.
Yep.
And I feel that as somebody who's very public. But I don't know, does that
Mhm.
resonate with you at all? Because I hear that kind of thing from people, especially like in this political climate, people not wanting to
It
take a stand on things.
does. Well, and my God,
How do you deal with it?
I'm immediately thinking about like the comments section, right? Which I'm like a moth to a flame. I can't keep away from it. But there's like, we're so quick to jump on somebody who, is giving a bullshit take. Like there's no calling in. It's all calling out. And I totally get why people are gun shy about, speaking up about something. Like if we were all just like a smidge more charitable toward one another, but we'd be in a very different place in general, like beyond the comment section, if we were all a little bit more charitable toward one another, I think.
Yeah,
At
but see,
least in
Paige,
that learning out loud way.
yeah. Well, it takes me back to
But
the
man,
more kind to people and like not just raging. And that's why I vacillate so much in that space. And there are times where I feel so much more charitable. And it like, again, with men where I'm like, no, like they swim in these waters and who's going to educate them? And, but there are those times where I'm like, yeah, and I can jump into those waters, but there's a lot more times where I just can't find that charity in myself. But if I can't, it's like how we do anything is how we do everything. And so if I can't find it for those men, then I can't find it for Lindy. But I'm finding it for Lindy, so I need to extend the same to other spaces. And I don't know. That's where like Amelia again, I feel is more evolved than I am.
Like, we're finding space for 2012 Lindy.
Yes,
and that's
true.
That's really different. I think, and there are shades of bullshit, right? Like there are comments that we can read as like, oh, this person should know better. This person is rage baiting. This person is an asshole. Like you can see those things pretty out loud, and you can see when someone just has a misguided notion about something or whatever. And there are some days when I'm feeling spicier than other days. And sometimes I'll dive in, especially now I'm sort of understanding the allure of having like an Instagram handle that isn't your real name. So I'm like, I have a different Instagram handle now. I have a private account, and man, nobody can come for me. I'm a straight up stranger on the internet, and there's like I kind of understand why people hide behind anonymity on the internet. Like I could see the appeal, and I'm not going to wield that as a rule. But the times when somebody kind of comes for me and says like, yo, this is not the way, which doesn't, I'm not saying like it doesn't happen to me really, but the times that it does happen, I really try to sit back, take a beat, and actually think about what I've been told. Because I am a person who craves learning every day. I want to take in diverse perspectives. I want to understand what I'm getting wrong, so that in another 12, 13 years, I can look back and cringe at myself, but then also celebrate how far I've come and, whatever new things I can contribute to the conversation. Like I want to be proud of that. And the only way we can do that is by continuing to learn and being willing to fuck it up in public.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I fuck it up in public all the time. And I think the fear piece is mostly from people with a lot of privilege who haven't learned how to make amends, right? Who haven't learned what it looks like to do restorative justice or, harm repair in a way that's healthy. And again, there's the waters we swim in. How would you know if you've never seen it, if you've never really experienced it, if you've never been taught about it and shown that it's important, right? Because you've been always sort of shown when you have a lot of privilege, you're sort of taught that you don't have to do that stuff, right? That's not important and that you're right. And
top of the food chain.
Double down and all of that, get defensive. So learning those things helps me because then I know I'm going to mess up. There's no way that you can learn out loud and not mess up, but I know how to handle it if I do. But I also will say my relationship with social media is also changing in the other piece of that of like, it's not just about not wanting to show up because I still don't mind. Like, I love that piece. It's actually the part I like about social media, but what I don't love is what it can do to me, who it turns me into sometimes. And that's the part I still need to work on because you're right. Like the comment section or like, I can feel that urge to be the one who shows up to say, you're wrong.
Clap back.
You got it wrong. Right? Don't you know better? And why do I want to do that? Because it makes me feel better.
Because it makes you feel like the good one.
Exactly. Yep. And that is like something we all have to evaluate in ourselves as well. Because like my urge to be like looking at this piece saying like, she should know better and she should have done better and like, whatever, like there can be truth to that, but what good does that do? Like, that's just me wanting to prove that, I'm better and I know and I'm a good, I'm exactly. What is healthy is the parts where we discuss, well, what could have been better? What was missing? Those sorts of things. And that's the part that the nuance that you mentioned that doesn't really happen in 140 characters or whatever the counts are these days. Like you can't have those kind of nuanced conversations on social media, which is what more and more keeps me away. Because more and more I'm like, without nuance, all we're left with is people trying to prove themselves, trying to one up each other, all of that. Like it's all toxicity.
Yep. Those are like, now we also have like those waters that we swim in that have become so polluted and so addictive by design. Like that's the box that we've been shoved into and reduced to. And that's by design too. Like it's the same, like we now have like ads shoved down our throats every moment of the day. And like social media has ceased to be social. Now it's just like, it's like hot take media all the time.
Yeah.
And I know there's been a big rise in Substack, right? Which is like reminiscent of the blogs of yesteryear, where in a way that like the news isn't like the comments on the New York Times have become an absolute cesspool of people who are like supposedly smart, just like blah, 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 at each other. But Substack feels like for now, one of those frontiers of a return to discourse.
Which is why I think so many people are having a hard time leaving based on a lot of the stuff around platforming Nazis and monetizing and making money off of, profiting off of Nazi voices. And like, this is where we have to get to. Things are nuanced. It is so difficult to have these conversations because I'm still using Substack. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I struggle with it. And where's my alternative? And the alternatives so far that are presented to me don't deliver. I wouldn't have met you on those. Like, this is how we connected, is through Substack, through being in a shared space.
Jessica Valenti's One Good Thing.
Yes, make sure you subscribe if you don't. Through this, supporting one person who's doing really good work in the world that aligns with both of our values and being able to be in space together virtually and connecting through there, mostly because I knew your name because I was like, I know your sister. And so then we ended up connecting.
Wild. My God.
The world is so small and weird, right? And it's all like different states and everything. But anyway, but that doesn't exist in another space right now. So like, do I isolate myself or do I make my values not quite align? Like these are challenging questions we all have to face and there are no easy answers. So
yeah, I think if we went nuclear on every problematic platform or whatever, we would be sitting in the dark churning butter right now.
Right.
And I'd love to
Or
make my
worse.
own butter. But
Or worse, we would be in Handmaid's Tale too, right? Like, so it could be even worse than churning butter.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Although I think I would make an excellent Martha. So if anyone is listening to this, you don't want me as a handmaid. Like, I'll make bread for you. So
I am no longer qualified for handmaidism as I'm rounding the end of that home plate on those things.
bitch,
So
you're going to the colonies.
Exactly. I would be out at the colony. So that sucks. So I'm real like, it all sucks, but I really don't want that.
That's so not funny. I'm like, okay, we've gone to this place. Time to wrap it.
Look, now we're like Lindy and we're trying to make jokes out of these things. But yes,
listen,
to your point. Well, I was just saying to your point of, yeah, if we went nuclear on everything and said anything that's wrong, anyone who makes a mistake has to be gone, we also wouldn't have Shrill. And Shrill's amazing. I love Shrill, right? So like, that's part of that. We have to allow people space for their journey. And that to me is, I think, a lot of what I get out of this too, is like, we have to allow space for the journey. And we can't be so quick to write people off, especially when they're trying. I mean, I think that this shows an effort. When
they're trying.
Exactly.
Not willfully ignorant assholes.
Yeah. Right.
Who
fuck them. The Andrew Tates of the world. Yeah, Andrew Tate's never going to try. He's never going to learn. He's monetizing willful ignorance. Like that's so okay. No, I'm not extending any amount of empathy for that. But so many folks who are getting sort of called in or called out around something like this as an example, like I'm not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater as it is. Oh, that sounds horrible. It's a really horrible phrase, but I'm not willing to do that because
phrase. I need to look
really
up
is,
where
right?
That stems from.
But because it does. Then who's left? I know that I have said things. I have said things that I would never say now. I have done, written, thought, whatever, things that were not aligned with how I show up today. I wouldn't want to be held accountable or held today on the standard of what I said in my teens. Like, no, I would, or in my early 20s or, even in my 30s. Like I am growing and learning.
Yeah. Or like 10 years ago for me.
Which is what this is, right? So take it for what it's worth. Okay, I like to end these by asking, do you recommend people read it? And if so, who?
Read it. I think anyone who's listening to this should read it. I don't think a young, highly malleable mind necessarily needs to read this. Like there are better things for you to take in that aren't going to like muddy the waters for you. But if you're a geriatric millennial like I am, definitely read it for a look back. Hopefully you get to have a little eye roll and a giggle about it.
And a look how far I've come moment.
And a look how far I've come and a look how far we've come. And, maybe it'll give you some flags to look out for so that you can hopefully charitably call in a pussy hat wearing sister who isn't quite hitting the mark now, not to feel like the better, bigger person, but in service of all of us moving past this.
Yeah, an invitation to progress. I agree. I think I would not recommend anyone who's not white read it because I don't think you need to be traumatized in that way for any reason. Because I do think that I could see where that exclusion would feel anger-inducing, traumatizing, whatever. So like, I don't see any point in that. But I do think for white women, most especially like you said, those of a certain age, I think it's a great place to either check yourself on, has my feminism evolved beyond this? And if it hasn't, okay, great. There's an opportunity to learn. And if it has, I think it's also that great reminder of just like, yeah, look at that. Fuck yeah, I've evolved. And that does feel good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paige, for having this conversation with me. It was awesome.
It was so good.
You're awesome.
I love talking to you.
Thank you for being part of this assigned reading conversation. If you liked it, please pass it on. And if you loved it, would you leave a review? It will only take you a few seconds, but honestly, it makes a huge difference in spreading the word about the show. The essay is linked in the show notes, as is my newsletter, which is called Feminist Rants Are My Superpower, and I hope that you'll subscribe. I can't wait for our next conversation.